Hey, let me ask you a question.
Yo,
If
yo.
if you're a dad at a park, right? And you're with your kids, and I'm a dad at a park with my kids, and I come over and say hello to you, and I got this really good look going on with the scruff and the missing tooth and hillbilly look. Would you want to be my
hmm
friend? Would you naturally just want to be my friend when I just came up and said hello for the first time at a park?
Um, hmm. No, but I feel like I'm biased because I've been your friend for many, many years and I still don't want to be your friend. So there's that.
Do you think this
Why
new
did
look
did
of
you go up to be
mine?
somebody's friend and the guy was like, please don't talk to me?
No, but no, but it is interesting. Just your first perception of anybody, if they have like a missing tooth or whatever it is, right? Like whatever you're not, right? If you're filled with tattoos or you have piercings all over the place, or if you're a different color or you're wearing something not normal, like whatever it is, it's just an interesting thought process to go through. Like first thought, would you be interested in like hanging out with this person because they might look a little bit different than you? I don't know. Just I don't, it just came to
Yeah.
mind. This is really
Well,
isn't even the
and
topic today, but
well, I think this should be the topic. I think we should talk about this and then we could do the other topic.
okay.
We just keep recording. So it's interesting. I was talking to a good buddy of mine. Um, and there were, so we kind of talked about this where we were challenging in a previous episode, each of the months of the
Hmm.
year to go out and meet somebody new.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that the there are so many different there's so many different aspects, and why I think this conversation is important is because I had this is coming off the heels of a conversation I had with my daughter. Um, a couple nights ago, we did like a late movie night. I was watching, I was with her and I was watching, it ended up being a real late night, because we had a great conversation, but I watched, I think it's called The Covenant. It's a Jake Gyllenhaal, movie that he basically, it's a movie about him and his interpreter. He's in Afghanistan. Long story short, he gets injured. His interpreter goes through, I mean, literal hell to get him, to a safe place, and it's a really good movie. But I started having this conversation after it concluded. My daughter and I, she's 13, and we started having this conversation about people and the preconceptions of things, specifically politics, right? And I don't intend to give, I have a viewpoint on the way we pulled out of Afghanistan. And I was talking to her about that, right? I said, because that's the premise of the movie. It came out after we basically abandoned all the folks that we abandoned in Afghanistan and left in 11 days or whatever it was. I was highlighting to her the importance of critical thought in the current political environment. And I said, hey, people, like, it's easy for them to hate Biden or hate Trump or whatever, right? And I would say my kids are more towards being Biden fans because they think Trump is mean, right? From a kid's perspective, they think he's mean. I appreciate that. And I said, okay, so let's I said this movie is about something that I personally um take great exception to because of the way that people trusted us, and then we, as a country, and we kind of abandoned, not kind of, we abandoned a number of people, and then just the facts of the facts that a lot of people have been murdered by the Taliban that trusted us, right? And more context to that, I had a really good friend, Yasser, in Maryland, and we started connecting through the gym and whatever. He was a neighbor of mine, really good dude. He was an Iraqi interpreter, and he was telling me about like what their life was like when they're not interpreting, and dude, like their stories are crazy, dude. Like, I mean, their whole family, people are trying to kill them because they're seen as traitors, right? And so that conversation then went, and I was like, oh, so let's talk about like what this thing was. This is my opinion on this. And then the conversation like shifted to a number of different people groups. And I didn't know this. Did you know there are 72 genders now at least when I looked it up. But there's 72 different
I
genders.
I did not know that.
I did not know that, right? I didn't know that there were 72.
Defined
And so we
by
started talking about
defined by who?
defined by how you feel any given day. I mean, really,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
I'm not trying to be sarcastic about it. Really, like when you look at them, like some are like one of them that we did kind of just have conversation, but one is like gender fuzzy. Like that's a gender fuzzy.
This is
And
the conversation that you and Maya were having.
the conversation went into these
Okay, gotcha.
different things, and one of the things was gender. I don't know how gender came up, but we're just talking through,
Yeah.
and it was this balancing of one, what am I called as a Christian to do? What does it mean to love the Lord your God with all your mind, heart, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself? What does that mean, and who does that include? And the Bible's pretty clear. Well, it's not clear, and I think intentionally so. Your neighbor is. We talk about this all the time, regardless if they're gender fuzzy, man, woman, whatever they are, right?
Yeah.
And Democrat, Republican, Trump or Biden, those two individuals themselves, I'm called to love them. And this was before the assassination attempt on Trump, and which those things add a level of sadness to this for me.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I think it's an issue. Oh, sorry. So balancing my Christian faith and what I'm called to do with also this idea that you just talked about on how I perceive and look at people and pass immediate judgment, right? And it's interesting because I was then talking to a really good buddy of mine the next day, and he's going through a lot. Actually, we have a number of buddies kind of going through similar corporate trainings and the pronoun thing and all the stuff. And one particular buddy of mine said, he's talking about the pronouns. He's like, dude, I just can't even, I can't even keep up, and it makes it very challenging because now there's new pronouns that starts with Z's, like there's Zens and these, whatever. And the pronoun game is getting strong too, right? Like it's getting up there with the 72 different gender considerations and potentially pronouns that accompany that. And so he was talking about microaggressions, and it was interesting because that word triggers a lot of people, particularly on the right. Like microaggressions is the stupidest thing ever. But I read a book called So You Want to Talk About Race. And that's where I first started learning about microaggressions. And I was like, oh, such an interesting topic. And there are things that we say and do. If you're honest, like when you see a minority and they speak very well, and you're like, oh man, that guy's very articulate. It, most of us don't think through most of us don't say that to white people, right? It's just a fact. Like we don't see a white person and they talk very articulately, and we're like, man, you're very articulate. But we tend to point that out with minorities. And so the microaggression aspect of it, I think these things, and to your point, these ways that we perceive others and our response to it says more about us than it does about others. And I think it has deep spiritual implications for how I want to be Christ-like, but also modeling. And this conversation just happened with my daughter and then my buddy. And I just was, with my buddy, I was like, I think you should open your mind a little bit to this microaggression thing. Don't let the term trigger you. Like I understand why it triggers because people are so sensitive. And trust me, I am not. I am. I'm a huge anti-victim. I'm a victim mentality. But there's truth in a lot of these things, and I think we have to distill the truth for ourselves. And so when you brought this up, it's an interesting topic for me because I think we have to look in the mirror a lot more and really scrutinize in the context of who we want to be and where those standards come from, scrutinize how far we truly are from that person. And a lot of that comes to your point at the park. Like, dude, you're an educated Naval Academy graduate, MBA. Do you have an MBA?
Yeah. NBA.
Yeah, MBA, having business owner, 20-year service member. Dude, but like you look like a hobo. I don't mean to be offensive by the hobo statement, but I'm just joking around, obviously. But it's interesting because it was probably in your mind how this person perceives you with your missing tooth and your scruff and your probably your mohawk when you had your mohawk cut.
Yeah,
It's interesting that you would think that because it's probably an indicator of how you would judge you, right?
totally.
And it's a completely interesting self-examination.
So speaking of self-examination, um, another prompt that has taken place because of our conversations inside the Kinetic Man, um, and another podcast we did just recently was this question of like unlikely friendship. Like, would you pursue unlikely friendship? And where I live in Parker, Colorado, Douglas County. It's primarily conservative. It's primarily white. Most of the churches and schools are, you know, well off white families. And one of the men in our mastermind, after that conversation of seeking out unlikely friendship, he went and seeked out an unlikely friend. He's a Naval Academy grad, white man. He went and sought out a friendship with an elderly black man, grandpa, and he said it was incredibly life giving. So that got in my head, and I started thinking about kind of like what I could do. Um, I went to a conference earlier this year called the Denver Faith and Works Conference, and there was a speaker at this conference, and he was an African American man. Um, he's a pastor of a church here locally in Denver, kind of in the middle of Denver, in the sub in the heart of Denver, and wrote a book that I'm reading right now. Fantastic book. Really has opened my eyes to some new ways to look at things. And I was like, you know what? Let's go to his church, right? Um, my family had slept in one Sunday morning. We missed like our normal Sunday service at our regular church. I looked up his service. It was later in the morning. Family woke up. I was like, hey, let's go to this other church. Um, expecting, you know, for me to go and fit right in and not feel any type of different way or anything like that. Well, we go, and uh, I don't want to ruin too much of the story because like I'm hoping that I'm talking this man later this week, and I'm inviting him onto our show as a podcast guest to talk about his book and maybe some of my experiences. But um, we were one of very few uh, white families in the church. I intentionally sat right in the front, right in the middle, um, and it was it was a 3 hour church service. Uh, it was maybe two and a half. Very very different than what our normal church. It was a Christian church, non-denominational Christian church, just like ours. So same belief system, same value system, but it was ran very different than ours. Our kids were with us, and bless their heart, they endured, you know, the longevity of the 2.5 hour, 3 hour service. Um, but what that did afterwards really brought some really cool conversations with my family. I asked my kids, like, you know, what do they think? How did they feel? Um, and I'll just be honest here, like I felt a similar way that my son felt a little bit. Like I felt out of place. I felt like I was not the majority. I felt like I was the minority, right? I felt like all eyes were on me because I was the hillbilly with a missing tooth and scruff and a mohawk, right? My son said he felt weird. That was his way of explaining how he felt in a church where he was the minority. He felt weird. Um, but man, I tell you what, like what a great experience. One, what a great conversation. Two, and three, it kind of opened up some things in me that I thought were just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I see black and white the same, right? Um, but to your point, maybe I don't.
Well, and I think it's okay. I, I love that story, by the way. And I'll tell you, I ended up on accident years ago. I ended up at the Essence Festival in New Orleans. I didn't know, dude. Every time I go to New Orleans, it's something that I'm not expecting. I was driving to a football
Yeah,
game from Pensacola. I ended up in New Orleans for. I just stopped. I was like, I've never been here before. I'm gonna stop. I stopped on. I think it was Labor Day weekend, and that's apparently gay Mardi Gras. So I ended up um, in New Orleans on gay Mardi Gras. That was an
nice.
experience.
Yeah,
And then Rocky Cheka and I were in Pensacola. We went 4th of July. We had nothing to do, so we went to New Orleans. Had no idea it was the Essence Festival, which is, for those not familiar, Essence is a, excuse me, is a black magazine. And then they have the Essence Festival is just it's effectively a gathering of a black gathering, predominantly black. I don't know if we saw any other whites in New Orleans for to celebrate and we ended up there that weekend. It was very interesting. Immediately upon getting out of the car, I was like, huh. And I'm Mexican, I'm minority, but I'm half white. I don't have the classic what people that I shouldn't say classic. I don't have the stereotypical Mexican, what most people think of when they think of Mexican. Most people think I'm Polynesian, but
you're a very
but but
white
I but I
Mexican.
also what's that?
You're a very white Mexican.
Yeah, very white Mexican. And I also have a background of growing up in a white home, white neighborhoods. And so, I it was the first time in my life where I was like, oh, I'm 100% like I am the minority here. And what it did, it taught me some empathy for what others must feel like, just in general. And then that snowballed into, man, what if I came from Mexico? Like my dad, I'm first generation American. My dad came, he didn't speak English, right? And so like imagine that, like you compounding that on top of it. You don't speak English. Like what does that do to your day? Like how does that challenge you, right? But it just helped me to gain a little bit of empathy. But to your point, I also think it's okay. It's okay to acknowledge that all of us we do have um, biases. We do have uh, prejudices. We do have these things. Like none of us are black and white. I would argue that nobody looks at and just like, yep, zero racist or everything to me is black and white except everybody. I call bullcrap on that. I do. I just do. Because it doesn't even have to be black and white. Say what if it's Muslim? Or what if it's somebody of a different whatever it is. And I think we're not nearly as accepting as we desire to be. And it's okay to admit that. But I think the action item there is to put yourself in a place to at least gain some empathy if you desire to be like if you're a Christian, like the idea of not loving your neighbor should be completely repulsive to you, right? And no matter what excuse you make to not love your neighbor, like that, those words should ring because Jesus straight up said, like, these are the two commandments: love the Lord your God with all mind, heart, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. There was no exception. He didn't like give like a unless or except if or when, but if they have or look or act, he didn't say that, dude. It's just like a statement, period. And so I think I love that you took your family. I love that you guys were uncomfortable. I would have been uncomfortable. And I love that your kid was able to voice it. Because if anybody's accepting, dude, it's kids, right?
Yeah,
I
for sure,
mean,
man.
kids are like the most pliable. They're the most uh colorblind, if you will. But even to feel weird, as he put it, in the words of a 6-year-old, I think it's important to note that we all have it. And that's a great starting point from which to be better, right? That's a great
For sure.
starting point from which to be better. Dude, I do it in my own family, bro. Because most of my family is the stereotypical Mexican, what you would the tats and the things, and some of them were gangbangers, and I mean all the stuff. Um, and I go into that environment, I'm like, and I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, oh man, this is my family. So I think it's okay to admit these things, and really, it's powerful to admit them so that you have a foundation and a baseline from which to be better.
Sure,
It's a good
man.
topic, dude. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if you come away with anything out of this, like maybe you challenge yourself to put yourself in some environments that you're not normally used to. And a similar challenge that we gave to finding an unlikely friend, maybe find an unlikely group, find an unlikely event or scenario or location. Maybe seek out um, a place where you feel weird.
Yeah, and I think acknowledging going into it that with the right mind and heart, you can, no matter what that environment is, you can learn something
For
and you
sure.
can be better in a way, in some way. Everybody has something to offer, and you're missing out on that blessing by closing those doors, right? Like I think about, you talk about hillbilly, whatever. I think about going to an environment like in the South with, you know, double chuck, maybe some missing teeth and some things, but like I think about that and it makes me highly uncomfortable. But there's a lot to be learned. I had some conversations recently with some dudes that are, from different places, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of depth. You just got to be willing to take that walk. So,
Yeah, buddy.
yeah, man, good topic. This wasn't what we were
Sure.
intending to talk about, but I think it's good. I think it's good to challenge ourselves to truly to be honest first and foremost, to and also to do the work to know who we want to become, the standards that we want to live by, and then ultimately to take action to become, identify those gaps and to become that person. It's good stuff.
Sir. Giddy up.
Giddy up.
Soup.